All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started today. I want to say good morning to everyone and welcome. My name is Marie Hutchison. I have the honor of serving as the creative specialist for the Bishop Bruce O. Innovation Center at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio, and partnering with our director, Sue Nilsson Kibbe. It's a true delight and just an absolute privilege of the Innovation Center to team up with the BMCR to bring today's Laity Leadership Institution course to you. And at this time, I want to introduce Dr. Yvette Richards and have her share as our host today about the vision of the BMCR and also introduce to us Dr. Camisha Chambers for today. Dr. Yvette?
Good morning. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to be with everyone. I am Dr. Yvette Richards. I am the South Central Jurisdiction BMCR coordinator and also serve as the advocacy chair for National BMCR. It is indeed a pleasure that our Laity Leadership Institute was created and is housed with our partnership with the United Innovation Center, the Bruce O. Innovation Center, under the leadership of Reverend Sue Kibbe and the dynamic Marie. We have been working so hard. This is our second year, and this is the first of 4 webinars this year that we will be providing for the laity across this wonderful United Methodist Church. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a woman of God, a faithful servant, and a person that I met while working on my doctorate. We are a part of the Rooted at United Theological Seminary. And as cohorts, we have just enjoyed each other's company. But more so, I found that the work, the research, and the passion of Dr. Camisha Chambers is something that everyone needs to understand and really take in, because we have come out of a pandemic. We have come out of life tragedies. We have come and overcome things in our lives. And dealing with trauma, people of color sometimes decides, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. So we have a person who has studied and immersed herself in trauma and the resilience of how you come through and how to live a life that God has called you to. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce a little sister, a friend, a woman of God, but to you, she is Dr. Camisha Chambers. Welcome, Dr. Camisha Chambers.
Good morning. Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to be here with you, Dr. Yvette. I am so thankful to you for the beautiful words that you just shared. It has been such a joy. Anytime I am privileged with the opportunity to come back to United, to do anything with BMCR, to talk about my work, my heart is exceedingly glad. So I am so thankful for this opportunity and to be here today. It is going to be a good time. We're going to talk about a tough topic, but it is going to be a good time. We're going to have an interactive moment together, several interactive moments together, and hopefully some thought-provoking times will arise in this experience together. Before we begin, if you'll pray with me, please. Eternal God, we are so thankful to you for meeting us here on today. We're so thankful to you for everything that you have been, everything that you are, and everything that you choose to be to us in our lives. We cannot do this thing called life without you. We need you, Lord, to help us day in and day out. We ask that you meet us in this time today. Be with us. Help us to understand what is actually happening in the world, in our own individual lives, and help us to see and to learn and to determine how to rise above the trauma and stresses of life. You've done it, and we know because we are resurrected with you, we too can become resilient people. We love you, God. We thank you, and we ask that you bless each and every individual that will be a part of this experience, Lord. Lord, please let everyone have one takeaway that is helpful to them today and all the subsequent days. We love you, we trust you, and we praise you. It's in the matchless name of Jesus we pray. Amen. So, always wanting to take a moment to really dive into the conversation around trauma and what that means and talking about it from multiple perspectives is always a gift to be able to do. But if we notice, trauma is something that is a topic that everybody talks about often. You hear about trauma every time you turn on the TV, whether you hear the word or whether you hear a story or an experience, some kind of way, trauma is surfacing in our lives. And if we have made it to 2024, all of us have experienced some level of trauma. When you talk about that crazy virus known as COVID-19 that shut down an entire universe, that in itself lets us know that we have all experienced some type of trauma, but it also shows that because we're here in this space, that hope and resilience is very much within reach. And so today we just want to talk about naming it, and then we want to talk about how we can overcome it and how we can utilize it for present day and for future. So, with that, I do want to share what our agenda looks like for today. We want to just spend a little bit of time, like I just mentioned, naming it. We want to talk about what exactly is happening when we hear certain things. What does that mean? When we feel certain things, what does that mean? When we see it in the lives of someone else, what does that mean? It's so many different pieces to trauma and such areas of trauma that we witness day in and day out. And so this time, the beginning of our time, is designed to talk about it. This lab is intentionally laced with interactive moments to think about the trauma that we personally experience and even the trauma that others may experience within our particular context, church context. Also, we want to have a listening circle. I know this is recorded, so I know folks are going to come back and check it out. But if there are some bold voices on this call in this space, I would love for us to participate in a listening circle to talk about what it is that we're hearing and also trauma healing has been linked to storytelling. And so when we tell our story and when we tell our experience, it not only heals us, but it also heals those that we're in community with. So listening circles are designed for healing purposes as well. Then we'll shift into talking about music matters, one of my ultimate favorite topics ever known to mankind. Music has been such a jewel in my life, and music prayerfully is or will be a jewel in yours as well. Listening circles, like I said, are really important to me. And then worship planning. Laity plays such a major role in the life of the church, regardless of what denomination we're talking about. Laity are the backbone of the church. Laity upholds all of the ministries within the church. Laity pushes forth the agenda of the church, and laity are the eyes and the ears of the church. And so without laity, we would not have churches. That's just the reality of things. And so we want to talk about the ways of which laity play a part in worship planning and even looking at how laity can help bring about resilient worshipful experiences within church context and what that even looks like and what that even means. And then any kind of reflections or open discussion. So my hope is that everyone came ready just to give one thought at minimum so we could get into some really good conversation. So to jumpstart that and to test my hope, if you will, I want to ask the grounding question. That grounding question is, what does the word trauma mean to me? When you hear the word trauma, what does it mean? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it mean to mean? Or does it mean anything at all?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind, Dr. Camisha, is just being hurt. Sometimes it's a deep hurt, but wounded, really, is what I think of when I think of trauma.
That's so good. So good.
Dr. Camisha, I would say it makes you off balance, irregular.
When I think of trauma, I think of painful events.
Painful events, yes. Yes, yes. Thank you all. Everything that you're saying is spot on. Painful events that create the wounds that cause us to be imbalanced, literally. You all have laced together an answer. And I promise for those who checked the recording, this was not planned. This was definitely something that is letting us know how interconnected we all are, just even in our thoughts. But trauma, when we think about the actual word, it means wound. And when we talk about what it does to us physically, yes, you can go to a hospital and a person can have a gunshot wound, right? And so they'll go to the what? The trauma unit. Individuals who have experienced multiple forms of painful experiences and events have experienced emotional trauma, spiritual trauma, mental trauma. All of this plays a part in how we show up in spaces, how we talk, how we act, how we move, even how we behave. And so trauma really has handheld a lot of us unbeknownst to us. And even when we think about the work of what we do in our churches and the major role that laity play, being the doorkeeper, right, in the eyes and the ears of the church, if you begin to think how much trauma enters into our doors every week, how many people are experiencing trauma each and every day, and they're bringing that into the worship setting. And sometimes it can make for challenging moments in church or challenging moments just even in our encounters with one another, because we're not talking to each other, we're talking to one another's traumas. And when we think about the work of what it is that we're doing in the faith-based setting, it aligns with the statistic of the National Institute on Health, where they share that in 2021, 1 in 5 adults were living with a mental illness. This was right after COVID when these statistics came through. But then when they went back and did some more research and statistics in 2023, they estimated that more than 1 in 5 adults are living with a mental illness. And so when we think about that in a larger umbrella or in the grand scheme of things, when we are in church and when we are worshiping together, if you have 20 people, at least 4 or 5 of them are experiencing, according to this data, some kind of mental illness. And so it's really important for us to talk about what it is that we are experiencing and what it is that we are seeing within our congregation. So let's talk about some of the things that we're seeing within our congregations. When we talk about naming trauma and naming what it is that we are experiencing or what someone in our congregation may be experiencing, these are just a few examples to share. So when we talk about acute trauma is one traumatic event that is brief in duration. And so when you think about acute trauma, it is maybe a physical assault, one-time occurrence that may happen, natural disasters that may occur, hurricane, flood, wildfire, earthquake, mass shootings may be considered a one-time event. Terrorist attacks, right? So 9/11, or when we see all of the unfortunate mass shootings that have happened in the United States, all of these things are what they would classify as acute trauma. So it is a single traumatic event that occurs in our lifetime. Then when we think about chronic trauma, we talk about a repeated and prolonged level of trauma, such as domestic violence or abuse. So a person who is in a relationship, intimate partner violence may show up. And one of the things that COVID has showed us when we were all isolated from one another in quarantine, domestic violence and intimate partner violence rates escalated. And so we saw a lot of the chronic trauma really surfacing in the homes of individuals. And that's not independent of people that we are worshiping with in church. These folks also go to church who have experienced these things. So if you think about the levels of repeated trauma that maybe ourselves or individuals in our lives or individuals that we know of, these are some of the examples. Also, a child who witnessed the abuse of a parent or a household member on an ongoing basis, repeatedly seeing that. A person who may be serving our country and is in war or combat. That is consistent levels of chronic and repeated trauma. Also, a person who has a chronic illness, if you are battling particular ongoing illnesses, that is also considered chronic trauma. And so when we think about that, we transition into complex trauma, which is varied in multiple traumatic events, often of an invasive and interpersonal nature. So pausing right there in that moment, we talk about this work, right? And we really look at the work of BMCR, which I so will forever adore until the day I get called home to glory. It's because it takes the time to intentionally look at what is happening with our Black and Brown sisters. And if you are Black and Brown in America, and if you dare to show up in your full capacity and full potential as Black and Brown person, you are battling multiple traumatic events. Just being Black alone in America, you are battling varied traumatic events. But then if you show up and if you do social justice work, if you are showing up and if you are being intentional about making sure that health equity is a factor in this world, if you are showing up making sure that your voice has equal rights in a situation or at a table, you are being hit with, if you're a woman, you're dealing with sexism, you're dealing with racism, you're dealing with all kinds of macro aggressions, all of these different things we are experiencing just being Black in America. If you are a woman in America, we are struggling, and not to make anything political, but we are struggling with just even having a voice, with having our voices taken from us, with having equal pay, with having all of the rights that we are due as women. We are dealing with a multiplicity of traumatic moments being women in society. If you are elderly in society, you are dealing with ageism. You are dealing with people who think that you no longer hold value because you might mix a word up or two, or you may move slower than you used to, or may feel like you're not capable of doing the things that you used to mentally because you are over a certain age limit. So a lot of us are dealing with multiple types of complex traumatic events. But then when you think about vicarious trauma, we talk about the things that we go through. But then when we think about it, if you have a heart, you are also absorbing the trauma of someone else. If you care about someone, you are experiencing that. If you are a caregiver, that can be something where you're experiencing, you may not have it firsthand, but the person that you're caring for, whatever they're feeling, whatever they're going through, you are absorbing. Or as a Black person in America, if you are driving in the car and you see a police officer or a police car and police sirens, you might become anxious. You might wonder, are they coming for me? Do I have my seatbelt on? Do I have on my are my headlights right? Was I speeding? I don't think I was. All of these different things, and that officer might not even be thinking about you. But because of what we have seen in the lives of Trayvon Martin, in the lives of Breonna Taylor, in the lives of George Floyd, in the lives of Tyree Nichols, in the lives of Sandra Bland. You could go on and on and on. You begin to think about, I may have not experienced that firsthand, but this is coming from a person who looks like me. This is coming from a person who may have a similar background like me, and I might be next. And so vicarious trauma is the emotional residue of exposure to traumatic stories and experiences of others through. So you experience secondhand what someone else has gone through firsthand. And vicarious trauma happens also in the church. If you are a person who's in laity, and if you are in servant leadership of any kind, you listen to someone, you may be a hand discipling someone, and what they're going through, you may feel too. So all of these things are really important to look at. And then we look at post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a disorder that develops in some people who have experienced a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. So a quick example of that could include our brothers and sisters who have been in war, who have had to deal with all of the sounds, all of the challenges, all of the issues that they've gone through. And then they are out of service and they're home, they're trying to live a regular life. And then boom, here comes 4th of July holiday. And what happens? Fireworks are being shot off. Now, for them, that is potentially traumatic because they're thinking about the war. Their mind goes back there, not in the present moment of just celebration for Independence Day. So PTSD shows up in a variety of ways, and it develops after individuals experience a shocking, scary, or dangerous event. So when we think about trauma and what happens, we can talk about it, right? We're naming it, but let's talk about what actually happens to us when we are experiencing trauma. So all those folks that we are thinking of within our particular church context, ourselves, anyone that is coming to mind in this moment, when we think about them, we also, what I would also like for us to consider thinking about what is internally happening to either ourselves or to those folks that we may service or folks that we're in relationship with. Anytime trauma enters into someone's life, according to science, the areas where the most impact occurs include the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, the amygdala, which is responsible for cognition, emotional learning and processing, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functions, planning, and decision making. And so when we look here at this slide, you can see the many places, you can see the brain, but then you can see the actual places of where the most impact occurs within us. And so when we look at the prefrontal cortex, it's our rational thinking. It regulates emotions such as fear responses from the amygdala. With PTSD, this has increased volume. Then we would look at the amygdala. Our bodies, the way that we are designed, we are wired for survival. And so the amygdala, when it is active, when it's wired for survival and when it's really active, it's hard to think rationally. The more hyperactive the amygdala is, the more signs of PTSD that are present. And so when you think about a person who is experiencing any kind of situation that's traumatic or a situation that may be perceived as traumatic, we may not understand why this person got so emotional. Like, why are you so, like, just calm down, it's okay. But what's really happening is the science behind it. Something may be triggering to them, or something may cause them to feel as if they are in the process of about to be harmed. And so because we're wired for survival, those emotions are kicking in, and it's really hard to pause and think, because why? That prefrontal cortex, all of that has been impacted because of the perceived traumatic event or the actual traumatic event. It really, really causes our brain to not fully function at its full potential. Then when you think about the hippocampus, it's responsible for memory and differentiating past and present, and it works to remember and make sense of the trauma. With consistent exposure to trauma, it shrinks. And so when we think about the hippocampus and what happens to us in that space, it's responsible for the learning and memory. So when you take, for instance, if we go back and we talk about the various types of trauma, think about children, right? If we have children's church or children who are in school, and when a child is exposed, if they see a parent being abused, if they are experiencing abuse, if they are food insecure, if they are unhoused and having to go from place to place, if they are every day not being nurtured, not being loved, not being affirmed, but hearing horrible things being told to them or consistent yelling at them, these are all traumatic things happening to this baby. And so when they come to school, the expectation is for them to be ready to learn, ready to absorb, ready to engage. And you think about what's happening to this child, why they are acting out, or why they are unable to absorb or listen or gather what you're saying, thinking about all the trauma in children. I'm not as seasoned as some folks in my life who I adore, but I'm not a spring chicken. I'm like, Lord, I don't think I could make it as a young person right now, if I'm honest, because young people in the line of work of what I do, the things that I dealt with as a 15, 16, 17-year-old they pale in comparison to what the young people are dealing with today. And so when we think about when they show up to school, when they show up to children's church, all of these things, this is the science of what we're seeing that's going on with these babies. So that just offers some type of example of showing how when trauma impacts us, it alters our brain and it causes some jarring and some challenges. And when it is not debriefed, it only grows and it escalates. It's a huge problem that we see, which is why we see adults who are unable to be rational, adults who have increased levels of cortisol, and so anything sets them off. We have people who it is really impossible to even communicate with them. These are some of the reasons why. So does anybody have any points or anything they want to add in this moment before we switch to the next piece? No? Okay. If not, it's fine. I always, if anybody has a burning thing, I always want to give that space for that.
Dr. Camisha, I'm glad you have the explanation that you brought because of the work we do as laity, and we have individuals that lead ministry. This is going to make me make sure I do a check-in, especially with one of our ministries that we do with our Loads of Love, with this our laundry ministry for the community. And it was started because of one of our urban elementary schools. They had a lot of bullying. And then the parents had to determine, do I keep my lights on or the water on? So they chose electricity. So they had no way of washing their clothes. And so it just morphed into bullying, children not coming to school, staying at home. Excuse me, when the pandemic hit, it was even worse because then we couldn't keep track of them or what was happening in the home. So this makes so much sense. And it helps us when we're doing ministry to make sure that not only maybe have a component as one of our wraparound services, but also then check in with my volunteers to make sure that they are well after sharing, handling, and talking with those in this trauma area. So thank you for that.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because what it does is it places real-time examples to the science and to the research. And it's unfortunate that these are the things that we see, but we are now, the church is the answer. And we are really in a space where it is, I believe Jesus has given us the opportunity to really sit with this and to learn it so that we can get to the root of a lot of things. Because a lot of times, which is why I put that Band-Aid image up there, because a lot of times we just put Band-Aids over and we just like, let's skedaddle and move on, when there's really deeper root cause challenges. And Jesus did whole person ministry. And so if that's what our role model did, that's what we're commissioned to do. So I'm grateful. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Yvette, because it makes so much sense to the research. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to? Okay. And so when we think about some more work with the brain, right? Everyone at this point, I believe, has heard the word, and this is a generalization, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but at some point, I believe everybody has heard the word trigger. It is something that people are saying all the time, like, oh, I'm triggered. Oh, that triggers me. Oh, that is triggering, right? And so it holds a lot of weight. It holds a lot of merit because triggers are real. And when we think about how triggers are formed in our bodies, and so when we see something, why are we connecting with it this way? What does that even mean? How did this happen? And so I'll use an example. My mom shared this in one of our times of conversation. I noticed when she was driving, she gets really anxious when it rains, and she gets incredibly anxious if it's raining and it's by a truck or like a big 18-wheeler. And so I'm like, well, mommy, what is, I mean, I understand, you're driving in the rain, you get kind of nervous or whatnot because you want to be safe. But her level of nervousness is a little escalated than the average emotion. Well, what happened is she was driving one time. She was in an SUV. It was raining. She was in a by 18-wheeler, and she hydroplaned on the expressway. And it was a very concerning thing for her because she didn't know if she was going to make it through that or not. You just never know, right? In those types of moments. And so what I realized is what was happening to her is, and I like totally dissected my mom, but took the time to think about what was happening with her and her brain in that moment when that initial experience occurred with her. She remembered, she saw things, so she was able to remember the rain. She was able to remember how she felt, the fear that set in. Her senses, her five senses kicked in. And so what happens in that moment for her is now the hippocampus downloads that for that learning and that memory component that has now downloaded that, and it has connected it to fear. And so anytime now when she sees rain, if she's in a, so it hurt for her, it was rain, it was vehicles, it was the expressway, and it was 18-wheelers. So anytime any of those components come into play, her mind does what? Goes back to that. And now all of her five senses are kicking in. And this is because what? She's wired for survival. She's now worried about her survival, and her triggers are kicking in, and it sends her back to that traumatic moment. And so triggers are formed in the brain. So anytime something sets us off, if you will, one or more of the five senses are connected to that because the hippocampus has locked that moment in, that traumatic moment. So anytime if there's a certain song, right, you can't hear, or a certain smell that sends you into a different space. A lot of sexual assault victims, certain touches, right? They can't handle certain smells, they can't handle certain looks they can't handle. And so it's because their mind, even though that real-time moment is not the traumatic event, the brain is perceiving it as trauma because we're wired for survival. So those five senses lock in with that traumatic moment, thus your triggers form. So it's important to recognize when triggers arise in our lives, and in that particular moment to give ourselves a pause and helping us to recall, okay, you can even thank yourself. Thank you, brain. Thank you, mind, for wiring me for survival, for trying to protect me in this moment, but I am safe. I am okay. This is not the same thing. And so triggers, when you think about that, we can have multiple triggers. If you think about your own triggers, that's real. And then when we go back to our particular church context, thinking about what the people that we are in relationship with, what their triggers may be. So just imagine all of this trauma, all of this stress, all of these triggers coming into one setting on a Sunday morning for worship, or coming into one setting during the week to do ministry work. Just think about all of that coming into the space. And we are talking about doing ministry for the greater good. But in order to get to the greater good, there's some internal work that has to happen. So these are just some of the things to begin to think about when it comes down to triggers. And also, when we talk about our cells and how we're made up, our entire nervous system is connected into this process and it is impacted by trauma. And when we talk about the nervous system, it plays a role in nearly every aspect of our health and well being. The nervous system controls our breathing, it controls our brain growth and development, it controls all of our sensations, it controls our perceptions, our thoughts and memories, sleep, our healing and rehabilitation. It controls heartbeat, it controls body temperature, hunger, thirst, digestion, and so many other components, reproductive health, fertility, puberty. The nervous system literally is what we are comprised of. And so when we begin to think about all of the challenges of what happens to us, it's safe to say that it's always good to know that we're not alone in this fight. Starting with Jesus himself, I shared this with a previous BMCR group where we talked about during Jesus's ministry, he encountered and navigated highly traumatic situations and severely traumatized people. And so, in our line of work as clergy and laity, particularly laity, because you really are engrossed and entrenched in this work, you are experiencing so many traumatic experiences and situations and severely traumatized people. But it's always good to know, once again, that we're not alone. Jesus himself, some of the examples of what he dealt with: the woman at the well, the woman with the issue of blood, the condemned woman, the Syrophoenician woman, the paralyzed man. And as I shared before, he had 40 plus accounts in the text that we see of traumatic situations that he encountered. And a lot of that, they didn't have official, like, oh, that's acute trauma, oh, that's chronic trauma, but it matches up to present day. Nothing is new under the sun. They had trauma, we have trauma. It existed then and now and will continue to exist, unfortunately. But when we think about what happened in the life of Jesus, when we look at who he was, just to add a little bit more to understanding him and his humanity, not only did he encounter people that dealt with trauma, but he himself was traumatized, very traumatized, not just from the work on the cross, but leading up to the cross. He was deeply traumatized. And so, just a couple of examples of for Jesus, just so that we can know what he had to experience and what he endured. He was a social and political advocate, right? So a lot of times we talk about the work of, doing justice, living right, living mercifully, all of this goodness. We got it from Jesus, and it was not an easy battle for him at all. He definitely was a disruptor of systems, like I know a lot of folks here who do the same thing, but also it's a very lonely process. It's a very lonely journey. And when you have a voice and when you speak up for what's right, you tend to be ostracized and isolated. And so people didn't understand him. People rejected him. His own family rejected him. They weren't embarrassed by him. So the things that he had to endure working and fulfilling his purpose was really, really troubling. He had to lead and deal with people who were incredibly contentious, his disciples, incredibly arrogant. He had to deal with all of the inner workings of what they had to go through. The fact that he was there in one of the biggest traumatic moments that he was about to encounter, and the people who he was discipling and leading, we're not even thinking about that, but talking about who's the greatest among us. Not even in the face of Jesus, in the midst of Jesus, right before he goes to die on the cross at the Last Supper. This is the conversation that is happening. So he was dealing, and it wasn't just then, he was dealing with all kind of contention prior to the battling inner workings between those disciples. And he was not, and going back to even how he was brought into the world, he was birthed in a manger, which was a feeding trough for animals. So he was birthed in filth. So he had so many different traumatic moments in his life. He endured much betrayal and rejection, like we do as well. So what we can see as we're in the ministry journey, in the ministry path, Jesus had the blueprint because he himself dealt with it. And then above all, he himself went to bear the most daunting task of dying on the cross so that you and I could have eternal life. And thinking about what he had to endure with just that process, and the intense pain, the immense struggle, all of what he had to encounter, the people who he discipled, walked with, cared for, betraying him, leaving him in his most daunting, horrific hour, saying that they didn't even know him, denying him. All of these things he had to deal with and still fulfill that task. Jesus definitely encountered trauma in ways that we could possibly understand and in ways that we'll never understand. And so, once again, it goes back to helping us to understand that we're not alone. So, with that, talking about trauma, thinking about trauma, absorbing what this all looks like, I do believe that it's incredibly important to create space to process. This isn't an easy topic indeed, but it's a necessary topic for us to talk through. And this is by no means trying to force anybody to have conversation. I don't want to do that at all. But if you are touched in any way by anything that you just heard in this portion, I would love for the space to open up for you to share.
Well, Dr. Camisha, I don't know about anybody else, but I felt like I'm having a personal session with Dr. Camisha today. And I'm just saying that as I have been walking with one of my dear friends for the last 2.5 years, who shared with just two of us on this journey that she had ALS, never wanted to share her diagnosis with friends, just let them think she, was not well. Well, she passed on Wednesday. And so just listening to all of the levels of trauma and the levels of what we go through. But this part here of listening, that is what I have received most out of this all. She lost her ability to speak. And so I had to listen and learn her body movement, her gestures, her facial expressions, and things of that nature. So this whole thing not only helps us in our everyday lives, but also the ability for us to listen when we're in the role of ministry. One of the events we had yesterday was field day at one of our elementary school. And when I got there in the morning, this little girl was crying. When I got back, she was still crying. So I was like, honey, you cannot cry for 3 hours. They're like, she's been crying all day. So I told her to come over here and sit by me, just lean on my leg. And and I was just like, well, you have to be able to tell me what's going on or we can't help you. So I didn't say anything else. I just let her cry, wiped her tears. And then eventually she started talking. So I think sometimes we rush to get the answer because as Christians, we want to, I'm a person that loves to solve the problem. And I think as Christians, when we hear the problem, we want to solve it versus sometimes all they need is someone to listen to them. And so the art of listening is, I found to be a very key skill that I've been working on. And I'm glad I'm moving in the other direction of trying to solve and to listen. So yes, it's been this whole presentation and sharing has brought things into have connected things not only for the ministry that we're doing and the work that we're doing as advocacy for BMCR and trying to be there, but also this next part in regards to the art of listening, I think is something key and critical that might be something that needs to be in the forefront for a lot of ministries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Camisha, I would like to comment as well. I came because I wanted to have a session. it's so difficult to be in a pastoral position or in a mental health position and find those who are sensitive to your needs. So thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Miss Wilson is saying something. Okay, there you go.
And I had unmuted myself earlier, and then all of a sudden I had been muted again. So I apologize for that. I think that I'm a retired school teacher. And so I tend to try to be a good listener. I find that teaching in school now and teaching in school when I used to teach, that the children have a different mode on what they do. And so I find that it's good to listen to see why they are upset about something that you wouldn't think about them being upset about, or there's something that they do in their lives that we weren't allowed to do when I was their age. And so listening to this today has brought back all kinds of memories for me. I teasingly say this is not premature grade. This is with the territory. And so I'm always trying to find a new way to get someone to where I work with the liturgists for our church services. And I'm trying to get younger ones to become a part of this. And there's just a certain age in there when you're just about ready to graduate from high school that they build up a rather quiet wall. They allow you in so far, and then you can't get any farther. So I have been working very, very hard to be a good listener or to ask a question that doesn't make them feel that I'm prying, but just merely wanting to be helpful.
Thank you. These are all beautiful reflections. Dr. Yvette, I'm so sorry to hear about your friend with that passing. I am so sorry. I know that you talked about that for a while. So I know that's tough. So 100% prayers your way. And just to hear everyone talk about the importance of listening. I think a lot of times when we do this work, some of us can be so compassion fatigued that we might not even hear or gauge what's happening. Or some people show up with preconceived notions in these spaces. There's so many different factors that come into play. But when we think about the immense level of trauma that is within our society and within our churches and within our own person, listening, I believe, is the antidote to so many issues, to so much sickness. If you just have a listening ear, someone who can be a presence for you, no judgment, a person who can just sit with you and just let you be. That's a lot of times that's what's necessary. It's just letting me be. And I have shared this with another BMCR group, how and a couple other groups, that Jesus even showed us the importance of just being in the right kind of village, to just be, when he had his Bethany. And he was just able to go and just have a meal, sit with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, and just be. And so, who are those people and places as ministry leaders and laity leaders where we can just be, right? How can we put on one ear or one hat when we're listening and helping those that we're in ministry with, but then how do we recharge and rebuild ourselves in our own safe spaces, right? We're creating it and curating it for others, but where is it for us? And so I think a lot of times it's either one or the other. But if we can make it a both and, we ourselves are individuals who can be really, really powerful ministers in this space. But I know that listening, it is an art. And it comes along with, okay, let me just sit and take off all blinders, all guards, all everything, and just let you say whatever you need to say. And let me just be a loving presence for you, i.e., Dr. Yvette and that young baby. Just letting her be. She cried. She had, because we don't know all the inner workings of what's happening in this child's life, but she needed to cry. That was her release in that moment. And she just needed a space where somebody could listen. And that listening could look like, here's my leg, here's my shoulder, here's my arm, take it. You cry, get it all out. And that is a form of listening, which goes back to the art of it. So these are some of the things that I just wanted to bring up for us just to begin to lay the groundwork for part two of our time together. Um, this is not something that is the end all be all. We don't know all of the inner workings of trauma. We don't know all of the many facets of trauma, but the things that we do know is so important for us to understand it and engage with, so that we can be our best selves and so that we can be the best potential minister that God has for us in the life of the church. Okay, so as we transition into our next portion together, it is so lovely to see um, things that you ordinarily wouldn't think that you would see in the text. And so when we take the time to look at Matthew 26 and 30, we know that the work of Jesus Christ was already inspiring, and it was incredible, and so many other adjectives and descriptions that we can add to it. But when we think about this one particular piece, it is, every time I look at it, I'm still like, wow. So when we talk about the context of it from Matthew 26:30, we're seeing that he is with his disciples. It's the Last Supper. He had all the stuff that was going on. Them talking about who's going to be the greatest amongst us, all this craziness happening. He knew that he was about to be betrayed. He knew he was going to be denied, all of these things. He still did the Last Supper with them, still served them, still graciously loved on them. And then verse 30 tells us in chapter 26, it says, um, when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, this is right after he had given them the cup, he had given them the bread, he gives them the commandments to go along with each, and then they go out and they sang a hymn. And so I was really, because of my passion for music and my love for music and my connection to it, I was already excited seeing that. But then it took me a little bit deeper in understanding, and it goes into our next portion that we'll really unpack how you can be in a space with traumatized folks in a traumatizing situation and still sing a song, and still find a song, still find music, still find some type of solace in music, and listening to what that really did in that moment and what it can do in our worship experiences. Because like I said, we're coming with a lot of stuff in this one environment, but we can still find the time and the space for a song, just like Jesus did. And so when we think about why this is so important, music really heals. Music has a lot of properties. This is something that I love, and I'm trying not to be like screaming on this time together because I like get so excited about music, and so I love it. So if you hear the octave in my voice rise, you'll know why. Music is my favorite pastime. And so when we think about music and how it's healing and what it does. Just to offer us some examples, music has served as a healing agent and friend for centuries, many centuries, and it is healing us still to this day. When we think of music and all of its beautiful qualities, it's of great importance to note that music can heal us spiritually, cognitively, emotionally, and physically. Music is an extraordinary gift with healing properties that include it can facilitate sleep inducement or relaxation. It can also increase respiratory capability. It is a cortisol reducer. And I want to pause for a second and talk about cortisol. And so, anytime stress arises in our system, there is a hormone that is released by it called cortisol. And it comes, if you notice, there's a time in the text where we read it saying, check my reins. And when we talk about that, and when we deal with the concept around nephrology and our kidneys, it's released in that area. And so, when you are looking at cortisol, and there are different levels of cortisol depending upon the amounts of levels of trauma a person endures. Cortisol is something that can be really damaging to us. And if we don't reduce it, it can cause health issues, kidney disease, all kind of things we see, heart problems, blood pressure increase, anxiety level increase, depression, suicidal ideations, all these different things. So to be able to note that music can actually reduce that is really, really important to note. It is also a solution-based tool that helps in the regeneration of the hippocampus. So if you recall in that previous slide, I had talked about the more trauma that is introduced to the brain, the hippocampus shrinks. But music can help in the regeneration process of that. So it can even heal. That's where I was saying it can heal us cognitively. It also promotes health and wellness, stress reduction. It diminishes pain. It enhances memory function. So when you think about an individual who may be experiencing dementia, Alzheimer's, in that category, personal story, my grandfather, now he has transitioned on, he transitioned last year, but he had dementia and it was really bad. And he would have I think what was it called, sundowners, or he would have these issues that would happen at nighttime, but he did not remember a lot of stuff. And when you would have a conversation with him, and it was really hard to see a man who knew so much, who was really, really educated, who was really the strength and the backbone of the family, not functioning in that space anymore and saying things that were not true, really demented, just in his thought process. And so what I would do is I knew that blues was his favorite music. And so I would go and I would play blues music for him. And it was almost an immediate shift that would happen from him telling things that were not true to recalling his life story and recalling things of him being a business owner and the things of his family down south. So music really does enhance memory function because it unlocks a certain portion of the memory and it activates the limbic system in a way that nothing else can. And so that's how come you see individuals who are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's really, really attracted to music because of what it can do to unlock the power of the memory. And it does enhance memory function. It improves communication. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the story of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, but when she was very powerful, very vocal. She was shot, and it impacted her brain, and it impacted the part that was connected to her speech, and so she couldn't speak. And so she was in the hospital. She was incredibly frustrated. She knew what she wanted to say, but she could not get the words out. And so they were doing multiple kind of therapies and treatments, and nothing was working. But they got a music therapist to come in and to work with her. And so the music therapist started saying words that she could remember, like light and mine and things of that nature. So what did she do? She sang This Little Light of Mine to former Congresswoman Giffords, and she just kept singing it. In her speech, it was able to regenerate the neuron pathways, and it was able to reconnect the synapses in her brain. and she was able to begin to talk. She could sing again, and it was the music that helped to do that. So it really does help improve communication, and it also helps to promote physical rehabilitation. Our bodies are wired and connected in a way to music. Our cells and organs are connected to music, so it helps with auditory sensing and cueing. And so a lot of times you'll see music therapists use music to help clients in the hospital clinical setting, to walk, stroke patients, helping with the memory, but also helping to relearn how to walk. It's the music, it's the rhythm, the melody, the beat, the tone, the rhythm, all of that that helps to get them back on track with their walking. And so these are just some of the incredible, extraordinary healing properties of music. Also, it is research has shown that if you play instruments like a harmonica or a recorder, that it can improve and increase lung capacity, and that just thinking about music, what it can do is it will increase your neutrophils, which is utilized for fighting off. It's a white blood cell that is important to help the immune system fight off infection. Just by thinking about music, the neutrophils are increased. So music has so many different physical and cognitive healing properties. When we think about music and what it can do for us, it informs us of how we want to take in information, how we receive information, and it also helps us in our emotional state of being. So if we have issues and challenges where we are anxious, or if we are upset, or if we are depressed, we can turn to music because we can listen to a certain song, which would then do what? Help us to begin to remember, like, wait a minute, hold on, this did help me in this time. And then our entire body and our entire person is connected in that song or in that particular moment. It could even just be a melody that can help to calm us. If we are feeling ourselves really, really, really anxious, we could just be a melody that can help to bring us down to where we need to be. Or you may not have access to a radio or to a speaker. You can just begin to think of the words of a particular song that has helped you in a trying time and just hum the words, and that can help you to heal. So music, as you can tell, I love picking apart because it really, really has helped. And so when you think about coming into our church settings and coming into our church spaces, why people come to church, they could have all kinds of baggage and weight bringing them down. But when they leave out, they look lighter, they look happier, they look relieved, if you will. It was that worshipful exchange that took place between them and God. It was the music that helped assist in the healing process. And it was also just being able to get some good word and to get some good spiritual nourishment. But music helps in self regulation. And so when you are thinking about an anxious moment that you may have in life, science has shown that if you put headphones in your ears, what happens is the music downloads into the eighth cranial nerve in the brain, and it immediately helps to regulate our blood pressure and our heart rate. And so there's a direct connection when we listen to music and what it does in the brain and how it in turn shows up in other physical spaces to who we are. So you have that kind of experience, or you have an experience in church where you can just relieve yourself through tears, through a shout, through a clap, through a stomp, through a dance, whatever the case may be, you are giving yourself some self-regulation because this is the environment and the opportunity that music provides for you. So these are just some of the very few reasons as to why I love music. Somebody talk to me. How does music impact you?
Well, I'm going to let Miss Wilson go first because she has been a part of writing and reviewing our music for the United Methodist Church and the Black Church. So I'm going to let her go, and then I will share.
Yes. Okay.
I was privileged to be asked to serve on the hymnal revision committee. So my John Henry is up in the front part of those books. And the call to worship, both of those books I was a part of. Uh, it is a time that we worked extremely hard to find music that hit all different generations and genders of our church and those that were not in our church. As you were saying, it helps to calm and serve as a backup to calm your nerves. It helps you to look at something in a different light that you hadn't thought of before. Um, you tend to find yourself in congregations, if you're not singing in choirs, that there is something about a particular song maybe that the choir sings, and that you begin to remember some of the words. So by the time you've heard that music again 2 or 3 different times at service or in other places, you tend to hum or sing along with it. You find your body relaxes, and that you're not really doing it really for somebody else. You're really kind of doing it for yourself. Maybe you're a little selfish in that, I don't know. But sometimes that's what we need, and we're not so tight. We talked about trauma. Trauma can make you feel so tight from the top of your head to the tip of your toe. But music has a way of releasing that and gives you a calmness about it. I used to tell my kids in class, in the music classrooms, that we're going to sing this particular song, and somebody may at home told them that you don't sing on key. And that's not really true. Everybody has a key to sing in. And if you're really within it and you feel the music, you can feel music also. And that kind of finds this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Or to look through your hymnal to find out, a lot of people don't know, for an example, that Duke Ellington has a hymn in our hymnal that he wrote. So it goes on all different levels, but the relaxation and sitting next to somebody else who said, I was always trying to remember what that next line was in the hymn, or that particular song that the choir also sings. Last night I was at a revival in my church, and one of our Baptist preachers and his choir came to sing. And the choir was made up of nothing but men. We see more women quite often in music, and especially in choirs. And this was all men. It was a refreshing feeling. And you found that people different places in the congregation were singing along as well. And so I find that as a relaxing mode too.
I love this so much.
Yes, she is a legend.
Yes.
And so I was like, I can't speak before the legend
Oh,
on music, because she is in the hymnals and by faith book, songs. So it's but music is I'm going to share in a different context. My grandmother was a musician for 65 years. She played for a United Methodist Church and a Baptist church. And she said I would go and play Methodist, then I would go next door and thump and bump. And so that's her thing, because she loved music. Music was her life. And she taught me, never sing second and fourth, 1, 3, and 5. If you ever are in a meeting and they try to do that, you stop it. So people have given me the eye when I say, we can't do that. My grandmother is looking down from heaven and she's gonna show up. And so they're like, well, we better sing all five on music, because you're messing the story. But when you talk about music as a center of calmness, I see that, and I've witnessed that in two places. One, when my dad was passing for the peaceful passing in hospice, I was in charge of that. And so he loved blues, jazz, and then gospel. So we had that playing because they were like, if you will keep him calm. And that was able for him to be calm. And then my girlfriend that just passed, she loved music, loved music. And so our friend who went to visit her, she said, Yvette, I brought my Bluetooth and played gospel. I said, well, when I was there earlier last year, I just put my phone up and put on gospel, and just the tenseness in her body relaxed. It is such a medicine that people often don't understand the healing factor of what it does. And it just brings up so many emotions just by hearing songs that you've heard or the words that you hear and that it's gotten through, like Yolanda Adams, this battle's not yours, it's the Lord's. I was working catastrophe and they were like, Yolanda Adams is coming. So about 8 of the co-workers went, and they were like, so she doesn't sing this battle's not yours, it's the Lord. She doesn't sing that on tour. I said, she's going to sing it because she knows I'm there. And they were saying, somebody tell Yvette she's not going to sing that song. On the first key, I stood up. They were like, okay, Yvette, we stood in front of you because we didn't know if you were going to levitate because you just lift your hands. I said, because when you have music that helps you through things, that just resonates down in your soul. So I said, I think she felt me and she knew I needed to hear that song. But music is a healing piece. Yeah. And I think that's why choir and music is so important, from having the young children's choir, so they begin to learn the words, but also these words and songs can be used when they're in situations in school, or if they're being bullied or they're in a tough situation, they can sing to themselves to help them calm down.
Yep, that's it. That's beautiful. Beautiful reflections, which shows us the power of music and what happens to us. So when we think about music oh yes, I'm sorry.
Just before we move on, to testify to the thoroughly faithfulness of God, I was visiting someone in San Diego, California one year and began to feel that I was in an unsafe space. And the one thing that God provided for me to keep me feeling safe was hearing a man singing in tenor, Holy Ground.
Oh, yeah.
And I played it all night long.
Wow. Wow. And that made you feel safe.
It certainly did.
I love that. All of these are beautiful reflections. All of these are beautiful reflections. Thank you so much for sharing that. When you think about everything that you're saying and what's going on, it's a science behind it too. And when we think about what's going on with our brains, right? So music activates pathways within the limbic system. And the limbic system is a complex system that's buried beneath the surface of the brain and is involved in learning, memory, and emotional responses, which is why we can recall things that help us in the moment, which is why we're learning stuff in that moment. And also, our emotional responses are connected in that space, the feelings of safety, feelings of relief, feelings of relaxation. All of these different things are attached to what music are results, direct results of the impact of music. Music also activates the reward center of the brain. And this is the kind of euphoria that you feel when you eat your favorite food or a piece of chocolate or get a favorite kind of treat or good coffee, right? You are feeling a level of reward that comes, and music activates that same area, which is why it feels good to us. Um, but it activates on a bigger level every area of the brain. Scientists have shown us in doing brain scans when listening to music is activity all over the brain. And this image here shows us when playing and listening to music, it works several areas of the brain. And so you can see just a couple of areas. When you talk about the amygdala, right? We had mentioned that earlier. It's involved in emotional reactions to music. Our memories are activated. Our sensory cortex is activated. Our auditory cortex is activated. Our cerebellum is moving. Our motor cortex, our prefrontal cortex. All of this is showing up every time we enter into worship. It's showing up deeply traumatized. And then when we are listening to music, it is showing us the healing that is taking place. So, this is a reason, the science behind when you come to church, when you leave out, you feel better. It's these types of self regulation moments that's happening because your entire person is involved in that experience. And one thing that music therapists have talked about and have shown us is yes, trauma impacts the brain, but when you bring music in, it either lessens the traumatic experiences or it dissipates altogether. So you can really, when Jesus is telling us to cast all of our cares upon him because he cares for us, take his yoke upon us because his burden is easy. His yoke is easy. His burden is light. These are the types of examples, real-time scientific practical examples of what that means. When you can trade your sorrow for the joy of the Lord, you can really, really say, God, I'm hurt. God, I'm stressed. God, this situation has happened to me. It has altered my brain. It has altered my emotions, but I need you for self regulation and to shift that all around. And God is a musician. I believe that God is our ultimate creator, but I also believe that God is a musician. And God has given us this entire gift to help us heal and to become resilient. And if we use it in a way that is more than just, oh, I like that beat, it can really, really provide some real time healing results for you. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Camisha, do you think that's why there's certain music is sung at different funerals and memorial services for the family to finally release that hole that they're holding in that grief moment? That just came to me when you started speaking on that. I noticed in churches there's certain songs that are played during funeral services, and it just struck me. I believe they're being played because it allows the family to maybe exhale at that moment because they're holding their breath for so long during this grieving process, that traumatic.
That's good. That's exactly it. One of the things that we notice is music influence our views in the world around us. And what that is known as, what you just described, Dr. Yvette, is called rhythmic entrainment. Music trains us. Music controls us. And a lot of times I remember I had a person who told me, they were like, well, I don't like music. That don't really do nothing for me. And I'm like, oh, okay. But you do know that you are controlled by sounds, right? And they still 100% not in agreement. And I'm like, well, just touch your wrist, just touch right here, touch right here. That's what you call a pulse. If you talk about that beating, that pulsating rhythm, we are controlled, which is why I say God is a musician. God created us with sounds internally inside of our bodies. And when we are in a diseased state, our rhythm is off, which is how a lot of times doctors can tell when something is going on with us. If you have a sonogram, if you have an ultrasound, if you have different kinds of tests, that are done. If your rhythm and your sound internally is off, they can tell something is going on. And so it goes to show you, same way, when you have the blood, right? You do blood work, they can see what's happening there. It's also the sounds and rhythms internally that can help to alert if something is going on with us. And so we are controlled by rhythm and beats. And so when you listen to certain songs, when you listen to certain sounds, and it goes along with that particular moment to aid in whatever it is that you need. And so if you are trying to create a joyful moment in church, that song choice looks different than what kind of song you would use to aid, like Dr. Yvette said, in a funeral for grief for a family who just needs to be able to hear certain words, hear a particular sound, and release themselves. So music really offers us the space to get us to where we need to be and to receive certain moments and to impart certain things into the lives of others. But rhythmic entrainment is incredibly important for us to think about and talk about for a quick moment. When you go to a restaurant, and if you are eating and your experience is accompanied by music, it's a pleasant experience, right? You're eating, you're enjoying it. But if they're ready for you to get up so that they can bring more people in for more money, they will turn that music up on you. They will make it difficult for you to engage in conversation with one another, or they could just turn it off. Like it could be one of those things where it's like, wait a minute, so if it's turned off or if it's loud, if the music is too loud for me to sit across the table from a sister and have a conversation, what do? Girl, let's hurry up and go because they ain't got time for this. So you'll leave. Or if you go into a store and if you say, I'm going to get this one thing, just one thing, that's all I'm going to get. And you listen to your favorite song in that store, by the time it's over, you have about 20, 25 things in your cart because you're going up and down the aisles, you dancing, you singing, you jumping. Oh, I could use that. Oh, I could use that too. Before you know it, you plan to spend $10 and you leaving out with $175 bill. Music helped you to get to that point. It's studies that show that there's a 20+% increase in your spending when you go into a store and engage with the music if you like the music. So music trains us in that way. Also, if you think about when you look at television, the entertainment world has completely understood this concept. If you're looking at a suspense movie or action movie, you can always tell when it is a victorious moment because of the sound that accompanies that moment, or you can tell when danger is about to strike because of the sound that is accompanying that scene. You can also tell when it's a scary movie, it's different sounds to that to get you, woo, what's about to happen. So if you didn't have the music and if you were just looking at the picture with the people, it would kind of be like, oh, okay, they just, all right. But it's the music that is engaging you in that space. So music
Dr.
really
Camisha,
does train. Oh,
I
yeah.
would share a funny. This is not a gospel song, but the Halloween, that movie, I don't know. Working in Katrina in Louisiana, a guy had his ringtone with that. And I heard that in the parking lot. I just stopped. I was like, wait a minute.
See?
I know it's just a movie, but that thing had my heart beating. I said, you need to change your ringtone if you're gonna be with us for a while. My heart was racing. So it's just so funny when you brought up
Yeah.
music and sound out. Crazy, but it does.
It does. It really does. And it helps you to know how, that's funny, but it helps us to follow it helps us in following the storyline and what's going on. And I can pull you in or I can draw you back and give you some reprieve when you hear a particular sound. And oh, okay, this is a safe moment, or this is a victorious moment, or this person has won in this battle and the thing. Also, when you think about church and when you think about how I know, especially in the Black church, when you have a preacher who has a melodic sound to his voice and then the music accompanies that, how the folks in the congregation are engaging in that moment, and the shouting that takes place and the release that takes place, the song that accompanies the preacher who helps as his voice is rising and falling and drawing you into every word that he's saying, and your emotions are kicking in. They call it hooping, right? In the Black church. I know sometimes that is a lost art that some people don't find to be of value nowadays, but it held a lot of value in my grandmom and in previous generation days that I still value. Because if it's done right, right? Like, I mean, like a C.L. Franklin type, right? Not these newer cats who don't really know what they're doing, but I'm talking about giving some theologically sound word that is accompanied by music. It is a euphoric experience that is indescribable, and it's very spiritual and sacred. So music, it shows up in so many different ways, and it shapes our views and our perspective and how we see the world. Commercials do the same thing. When you engage in commercials, and if it's the right kind of song that you'll like, you're more apt to pay attention to what they're talking about in the commercial versus just having, TV on and you get up, go get you a snack, go get you something to drink. But if it's your favorite kind of song, you're going to see what they're talking about. And sometimes it might draw you over into purchasing what they're advertising in that moment. So music really can help drive our day-to-day actions and interactions too. Um, so when we think about music and when we think about what happens to us as humans, it's also interesting to note what happens with animals too. Music does not just impact humans. And this was just a fun piece of research that I wanted to tag in here. It was something that I had read according to the National Geographic. What they had showed us or reported in 2005, before the tsunami in Sri Lanka, coastal animals seemed to sense something was coming and they fled to safety. According to eyewitnesses, the following events happened. Elephants screamed and ran for higher ground. Dogs refused to go outdoors. Flamingos abandoned their low-lying breeding areas, and zoo animals rushed into their shelters and could not be enticed to come back out. And what the wildlife experts believe happened is that animals have more acute hearing and other senses that enabled them to hear or feel the earth's vibration, which tipped them off to approaching disaster long before us humans even knew or realized what was going on. And as a result, the massive tsunami was triggered by magnitude 9 Temblor off the coast of northern Sumatra Island on December 26th. The giant waves rolled through the Indian Ocean, killing more than 150,000 people in a dozen countries. So it was just the vibration and the sounds that tipped the animals off to help them. So music even controls the species in mammals. So it just goes to show the strength of a sound, the strength of a tone, the strength of rhythm, the strength of vibrations, and what even happens to us in our worldviews. Music is incredibly powerful. What other experiences can you share where music has helped you? Anybody? Maybe. It's okay if not. It's okay. I just want to open the space if you needed to.
Well, I want them to come off mute because we don't have an option. Is Maria still on? I know she's on. Music to me is I would listen to it traveling for my job. I listen to my book on tape, but when I'm going through or tired, I know certain songs I'll put on that will keep me awake, that I can sing along to just in my car where nobody has to hear. But music is a sense of peace and a sense of assurance that God is close.
Yes.
And so anytime we have planned an event for Laity, for any conference with United Women in Faith, we're always looking at the music. What type of music will reflect us in the celebration of God's goodness? And so as we're planning for the SCJ, And music, I'm selfish. I need the person that I know could sing the music, and it just lifts you up. We had CC Winans in 2010 at our United Methodist Women in Assembly in St. Louis. And by chance, they asked me would I MC the event because the original person was not able to come. And I was like, so you want me to introduce CC Winans? And I was like, oh my gosh, because I love her music.
Yes.
And so when she came out and started ministering to everybody through Alabaster Box,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had to take my shoes off, and they were like, Yvette, you can go ahead and sing. I said, no, I'm wired, and I might hit a button. They're like, no, we have your mic totally turned off. And then I felt free to worship in that. Music is a sense of worshiping, and it just reassures you the words and the message that God has given those musicians and that talent, that God is right there anytime you need God.
Yes.
Anytime you need God. This, like I said, this battle's not yours, it's the Lord. And we won't even get on James Cleveland. This too shall pass. And so there's just songs that anytime I hear them, I got to hear the whole song and might play it over just to remember how God got me through that situation. So I know the next I will be able to get through as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I love that reflection, because what it does is it consistently shows just how powerful and how healing and how therapeutic music is and continues to be for us. And so when we think about our personal experiences, and then when we look at the text, and what healing or what music and worship does for us, it is really, really important for us to see and highlight the fact that the impact of music and worship, it mentally heals, it emotionally stabilizes, it helps us to stay and remain focused, and it regulates our physical numbers. And so when we look at the life of King David, he was a music therapist. I believe that if he was in today's age, he would be dubbed as one of the best board certified music therapists known to mankind. And we know that just from reading a story of King Saul, right? And so when we look at King Saul, and if he was in modern day, he would probably be classified as bipolar schizophrenic. He had all kinds of violent outbursts that he would experience, and those who were in his courts were also experiencing, right? So they were dealing with that vicarious trauma. He's dealing with his traumatic moment, they're dealing with it vicariously. And so it took one of the servants to really sit and talk with him. And if you look at the text, I think the word of God is really, really intentional, and it's so important to study it because certain words help us to see certain things. And so when we look at what that servant said in the text, he said to get a skilled musician to come in and to serve King Saul in that moment. I'm not knocking musicians in general. I think that musicians are great, but it's a difference when you are listening to a musician and a skilled musician. Because that skill that comes along with it is what really helps to shift atmospheres and what's really helping to shift internal challenges that a person is going through. And we see that when they brought David in and he rendered his music therapy for King Saul. And every time he would have an outburst, or how the text tells us that evil spirit would come upon him, David will play, and that spirit in that moment would subside. And so we get a chance to see what was happening to King Saul just in our conversations around the science behind music. And when we are introducing ourselves to it, the same thing is what was happening to King Saul. Scientifically, his brain was connecting. Emotionally, he was able to connect and calm himself, but it was through the skilled musicianship of David. Also, excuse me, also we see when we look at the life of David, complex trauma complex PTSD accompanied this man. He dealt with so many different traumatic experiences, being, in the service of this man to turning around, being the focal point of this man, being, Saul being jealous of him, trying to murder him, his son Absalom trying to murder him. I mean, he had all kinds of challenges that he had to face. But David was a worshiper. He was intentionally making sure that he stayed in the face of God, that he was the man after God's own heart. Deeply flawed, but also at the end of the day, this man had no problem worshiping God, worshiping and dancing before God to the point of being out of his clothes, to the point of him making sure that he set up an atmosphere of worship where it was 24 hours of worship that occurred. And while he was there, the peace that dwelt there. David was really, really intentional about uplifting the healing powers and properties and the power that comes along with worshiping God. And we see that even when he was dealing with the challenges around Ziklag, when he was there and the ambush that took place and how they had taken away all of the children, the women, the food, all of that, and the men, his men that was with him in Ziklag turned on him. So all he had was an opportunity was to encourage himself in the Lord. And the text once again tells us it's one thing when you can encourage and do encouragement and encouraging yourself, but it is another when you encourage yourself in the Lord. Those three words hold a lot of weight. And so when he was able to walk into that, that's when his self-regulation kicked in. That's when he was able to hear from God. He was able to control his emotions and he heard from God. Do I pursue? And the words clearly came from God to pursue. And he was able to go back and reclaim everything that was stolen from him and his men. But it took that moment of encouraging himself in the Lord, and it took that moment of that self regulation and that worship and getting before God for him to be able to make the right decision. Same thing happens for us. When traumatic moments happen in our lives, it's up to us to get that self regulation, to pause, to encourage ourselves in the Lord, be it worship, reading our scripture, doing a devotional, praying, meditating, laying prostrate, getting before God, crying, whatever that kind of release is that you need to be able to get that self-regulation between you and God, do it. Because that then internally helps you cognitively. You're able to now think. Your emotions are not overriding your judgment. And you're able to make the best sound decision for yourself. So we see that in the text. We also see when we look at King Jehoshaphat, right? And that whole story that comes along with that. Music and worship played a really, really major part in helping to calm the anxiety and the fear that set in with King Jehoshaphat, but also it was the musicians that went into battle. It was the words, it was the song, it was the singing that caused God to then insert himself in that battle and ambushed the enemy of what they were for King Jehoshaphat and his army. So it was the music that confused the enemy. And as a result, the enemy turns on themselves. The battle is won. But it was the music and the worship that helped him to be able to go on a fast, to cause him to be able to regulate. Okay, I'm fearful. I got these issues going on. God, talk to me. God, tell me what's going on. Help me to make the best decision, and called it for all of his people as well. So as we can see, victorious moments that happen is when music and worship is incorporated because of the ability to help us to self-regulate, the ability to help us to be calm, the ability to help us think rationally, and to help us to be able to be victorious like God has called us to. So these are just some biblical examples of the power of music and the power of worship. And then when we take the time to really begin to think about our own environments at church and what it is that we are wanting to bring about as far as a healing atmosphere and a healing place and a healing circle, what are the key ingredients that are needed in our churches to have a worship setting that promotes trauma resiliency, that promotes healing, and that promotes wholeness amongst our brothers and sisters in our worship spaces? What would you say some of the key ingredients?
I would say from the laity perspective, there's a lot of church hurt where people feel that the same people are asked to do the same thing in ministry. And so relieving a lot of church hurt, I think, would free people up to know it's not about serving man, but it's about serving God, because our assignment does not come from man, it comes from God, which is very difficult. I've had to learn that, and I'm encouraging and talking to myself. But through asking people to volunteer, engage, participate, they're talking about things that happened 20 and 30 years ago. And I'm like, okay, let's find a way to release that, because you want to be able to live out your calling that God has on your life. And if you're stuck 30 years ago and 20 years ago, you can't do that. And somebody's missing a blessing where you're not able to serve in the role that God has for you.
That's good. Yeah.
I'd like to say that's where music plays such a very key role, because it literally sets the stage for your worship every morning that you have it. When you're getting ready for to come to the altar for worship and for prayers, a hymn like Sweet Hour of Prayer immediately, for an example, sets the mood into that. When we have our children do their Christmas programs or their Easter poems or things, there are words that are said, they sing, and then they think about their little brother and their little sister and so on. So I think that music is a very key part for setting that mood and that mood, because you may have not come to church on a very happy mood some mornings, or maybe you never experienced that. And when you've had a chance to sit down and listen to the prelude that comes, helps to relax you and to change your mood and your thought plan.
That's so good.
I so appreciate a skilled worship leader who recognizes the shift in the spirit and who knows when to stop and just let God be God.
Oh, that's good. That's so good. So having an awareness of God, Holy Spirit, of self and others that we're in community with, making sure that the right song choice is included. And one of the things that I think about with a key ingredient for and you know what, that goes into also thinking about having when the skilled musician or the skilled worship leader would require them to have a worshipful life, right? Like making sure that they are in a place where they are really responsible for their own self, responsible for their spiritual health, they take accountability and making sure I'm reading my word every single day. I'm taking accountability for my actions. I'm making sure that I am getting before God every single day. Because then it will help them to create room for the Holy Spirit to move, to be in sync, to be in tune, because the Holy Spirit can then share how that particular service should flow. So I think that that really hit me, that comment around having a skillful worship leader. Because if you don't, you can really, really miss the mark on a lot of things, and can run the risk of folks who are coming into that space not receiving the help that they need. You might have a person who's so inundated with trauma that they may have had a suicidal ideation and say that if I don't get what I need in this moment, I'm taking my life as soon as I leave from here. There's so many instances that I know of. I'm walking alongside some folks now where there was a young person who took their life at the altar in a church during the week. They were so um, heavy with life's burdens and life's challenges. They went on ahead and ended their life. And so it's so crucial for us to create the proper trauma-informed worship space, where people can come. Because like I said, the statistics and the numbers don't lie. We're talking about more than 1 in 5 adults are battling a mental illness. That's adults. We're not even talking about children. And so thinking about what children are going through, thinking about what young people are going through, the rate of suicide amongst young people has escalated to a degree that I don't think any of us have ever thought we would see coming. And so, how do you create safe spaces for these folks? It requires people who are 100% in sync and in tune with God, and making sure that that worship environment, that whole entire space, has God as the focal point. And that there is a space, of course, for us to get out of the way and for the Holy Spirit to move. Um, when we think about worship, a lot of times people are like, okay, praises, I'm clapping my hands and I'm clapping my hands and I'm lifting up my arms and I'm saying, thank you, Jesus. And worship is I'm closing my eyes and I'm just like really into it and I'm really singing. And it's like, okay, but there's a lot more that comes along with that. What is your daily lifestyle looking like? What is that spiritual cultivation looking like? How often do we commune with God? How often are we getting before God? Because if we don't have a worshipful life, which in essence is saying a life that is devoted to God, 100% mind, body, and spirit, how how many of us are coming into a space serving in leadership and not living a worshipful life? And when we think about that, what in turn is that doing to our church? And so it's so important for our leaders to understand the importance of what that looks like, and the weight of what comes along with leadership in the church, be it clergy or laity. I really feel in my heart of hearts that laity is the front runner when it comes to leadership. And so it is so important for us to be upright in our thinking and in our doing and in our handlings as we are ministering to God's people. When we think about so wanting to slip into this last portion here, just as we continue to talk about what trauma resiliency and healing looks like in music and worshipful settings. This right here, if we take a page out of the book of our ancestors, this is what they call an invisible church, right? This is one of the pictures of an invisible church. And if you begin to think about what was happening in this time and what even led to this moment, you talk about the ships of which they were taken and brought over here on. If you just start there, and thinking about the makeup of the ship, how the men were chained 2 by 2 the entire time, the women were chained, but they could, or they were together, but they were able to kind of like move a little bit amongst their area, but the children were able to move amongst the boat. But thinking about that small space that contained them, all of their bodily fluids were mixed in together. People were sick in that whole environment, the beatings, all the women being taken and used for sexual pleasure, coming over here pregnant, having to bear all of that disgustingness, traveling by boat from Africa to the Americas. So that right there alone, that level of trauma. And then so millions were lost in the transit. And then when we think about those who got here, having to endure all of that, being stripped of who you are, being stripped of your name, being stripped of your family, your babies being taken from you, all of that to a place that you don't know, language barriers, fear, complete unknown. You have no idea. And then to be beat, tormented, all of that. So carrying all of that each and every day, and then being able to have this kind of space makes it so much more powerful when you understand this particular scenario and situation where you have one of the women come in with the big tin pan and flip that over so that it can bring the sound down so that the master can't hear what's going on. But to have slaves coming together, enduring after a day of hardships, being beat, seeing somebody that they're on the plantation with being beat, all of the harm that they've had to endure, the hard work that they've had to endure, the labor, all of what has happened. But going back into the space here, when you think about all of the challenges of what they had to endure, and then think about coming together in the spiritual space, being able to share a word amongst one another, being able to share a song, being able to sing together. All of that release happened in this moment. And this is what they were able, our ancestors were able to hold on to give them strength for another day. And so these invisible churches become more and more valuable when you think about the trauma and the stress of what goes on within the Black race and within communities of color, because it was only the spiritual aspect that gave them the mental fortitude and the physical strength to endure. And so it reigns true today when we think about all of the trauma, even though it may not necessarily be physical beatings or being in a cotton field or being in the space where you're fearful of master, but you might be fearful of other things in life. A child might come to school fearful of being beaten when they go home, or sexual abuse. They come into your presence at church not knowing, you not knowing what they're going home to, or a mother or a wife being beat when she goes home, or a person who may be incarcerated. If you're doing prison ministry, what could be going on in those spaces? There's so much trauma and stress. Like I said, it may not be in this particular context of what we're looking at, but the trauma still reigns supreme today. And so, how do we create spaces for people to be able to, how do we equally hold space for a person to be able to come get the release and the reprieve that they need, but then also being able to give them the strength that they need for another day, to be able to go back out into who knows what they're going to encounter. In this picture, we don't know what these ancestors had to encounter the next day when they wake up. Are they going to be beat just like they saw another slave being beat that day? Are they going to have, any kind of on the receiving end of some harsh language? You never know what they were going to encounter the next day. But in this moment, you can see the hands raised, the knees being knelt, because it was in that spiritual moment that they got what they needed. So how can we bring that into present day where we offer this kind of space of safety, creating hope and giving strength for another day. I think I saw your hand, Dr. Yvette, or was I?
Honey, I'm sorry. I'm gonna owe them another session because this right here is so on point in the ministry work that we do, because we're not only doing ministry at our church, a lot of our ministry is outside. And so when you're talking about how do we do this work, how do we, we see this, and I can remember distinctly in regards to how do you handle a situation where we did our group of young women, we said we're going to go paint one of our battered women's shelters. And so we have got our books, our supplies, went over. Little did we know when we walked in, we ran into a church member. And it was in that moment we were like, let's not bring light. It's the balance, keep her confidentiality and her respect. But it's like, you're right. We have no clue what our members are going through when they walk into church on Sunday. We knew that she was married. We had no clue that something had happened that would take her to a shelter from the person she was married to, who happened to be another church member. So it's like, okay, we saw that, but let's not address it. And so the counselor told us, we did not know she was a member of your church. This is how we think you should handle it. And so, it's kid gloves, very, kind. And when you see her at church, it's not going up to her, oh, I'm sorry. You don't make a big deal out of it. You just let her know we're there for you. So when we think of all the trauma that our ancestors went through, it doesn't look like that, but today it looks a little different, especially in the context around our school system, where majority of the children in the urban schools are on free or reduced lunch. So what's that trauma that they're bringing? That bully, that unable to wash, that unable to learn. I don't have the supplies. I'm not able to engage. They're telling me that if I get an education, it will take me out of this, but I can't even get my education because of all these roadblocks and things that are keeping us down. So it's just, excuse me, just putting that into context, because when we send our volunteers out into the world, outside of the church walls to do the ministry, whether it's in the food pantry, whether we're doing Loads of Love, or if you have a reading program, or, whatever you're doing the gardening, you just never know who you're standing by. So as ministry leaders, we have to have that listening ear up and be very careful what we say, because we tend to do more harm than help when we have no clue that words can push you down further. As an example, we had an individual that was volunteering, and they really had to remove them because they were like, why is that person in the food line? Look at the type of car they drive. You don't even know they could have borrowed that car from a friend just to come get them some groceries. So sometimes when we're doing ministry, it's like we're going to have to make sure our volunteers are reminded. And we just said that at our church that we need to do a sensitivity training, especially if we partner with other individual churches that don't have the same melanin as we do. So it will not appear that they're coming in as a savior, but as a helper.
That's good. That's really good. Coming in as a helper, and also creating a space where folks can really see what is happening, see what's being said and what's not being said, see what's right before them and what's hidden. All of that, creating that ministry space. That's what trauma-informed worship spaces look like. It's not just having a setting where we're singing beautifully, but it's a if we're living a worshipful life, our entire being is dedicated and devoted to God. So that's all of the things associated with us, all of the ministry efforts associated with us. It's completely dedicated to God, and it takes this kind of approach to make it completely successful and safe for those who are experiencing the trauma. And so it took wisdom, right, on your part when you saw the woman who you didn't have any idea of what was going on with her, but to be able to walk in that space and not embarrass her, but still love on her and still provide for her what she needed, and also creating a safe space for her return. All of that matters. And that's what trauma-informed worship practices look like. And worship and healing, and worship and music really can accompany in that healing space, indeed. And as we can see here, taking a page out of our ancestors' book, just looking at all of what they had to face that day and the subsequent days, but just knowing that they could take a time to worship and get before God, singing in certain songs of, my Lord delivered Daniel, or hush, somebody's calling my name, or go down Moses, or any of those songs that they really, utilized during that time just to give them strength to carry on another day. We see in real time now, but we can look at these pictures and have discussions to understand how they made it. It was not in their own merit. It was literally the strength of the Holy Spirit that helped them, literally. And that's what is needed for us in present day ministry work. When we think about all of the things that we are doing and bringing together collective worship experiences. We're talking about listening. We're talking about seeing a person for who they are. We are talking about no judgment. We are talking about love. We are talking about worship. We're talking about music. We're talking about providing a holistic experience for a person in our churches. And when we do that, that's where we see transformation taking place. That's where we see an individual become resilient. And we know resilience, I had shared with someone a while ago, resilience isn't about who's the grittiest or who's the toughest or any of that. But resilience is really being able to understand that I am ultra dependent upon God for my life, for my very life. And when I really wrap my mind around that concept and I devote myself to God, I use the tools of worship and music to help me. That is my way of being resilient of all of the trauma and the stresses that come in my life. And when we just begin to think about what God has given us as tools to help us, we too can create healthy, resilient, collective experiences, worship experiences in our churches. Um, in conclusion, I really wanted to recap everything to the best of my ability that we have talked about on today. When we think about life and when we look at things, all of us at some point in time has experienced some form of trauma. At some point, we've experienced trauma, be it acute, chronic, complex, vicarious trauma, PTSD, we have experienced it. But one of the things that is so helpful for all of us to know is that we're not alone in this experience. Jesus himself experienced trauma all throughout his life, as we see in the text. And so that's why worship becomes so critical, because the very entity and deity that we are honoring and reverencing each and every day in our lives understands our pain, understands our trauma, understands what we have gone through because he was fully human and fully divine. And so that humanity of Jesus understands what we go through as humans. Music is one way that can really help us heal cognitively, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. There are scientific proof and practices, scientific research and proof that shows us that music practices and worship practices can really help us heal from the variety of traumas that we may go through in our lives. Jesus taught us self-regulating practices. When we look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was a worshiper. Jesus prayed often. Jesus got away from everything and everybody to get before God and to really, really go into meaningful prayer. We see mountaintop prayers. We see garden prayers. We see prayers along the shores. Jesus was really intentional even when he was praying. We see prayers in the valley, when he had his God experience, when he had his human conscious experience, his landscape experience. He was really intentional about the type of prayer and when he would pray and how he would pray. But he prayed. That is a 100% direct channel to God and is a part of a worshipful life. And that's a part of his self-regulating practices that he taught us to employ in our own lives. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We see the brain as a powerful, powerful, powerful tool. The brain controls us. The brain controls everything. And so we understand that life situations and circumstances happen to us, and it does alter the brain and it does alter us. But if it is not debriefed, it can keep us in that altered state of being. But God crafted us in a way and has given us tools that can help bring us back to the original state of where we should be, in that of music and in that of worship. Music does shape our worldview. When we engage with music, it drives how we see things, it drives how we think, it drives how we operate sometimes. Music is one way to help us prepare for our spiritual assignment. So, like I always have been saying through this conversation, laity drives everything within the church. And as laity is continuing to prepare for their spiritual assignment, one of the ways that laity can self-regulate is through music. Music can help to prepare for your assignment. Music can help keep us in that worshipful life that we should aspire to have. And different kinds of music can help as well. So you listen to different types of music, different types of gospel music. It can help us in accordance to the particular mood that we may be operating in or the particular need that we may have. So if we need to get our brain in a calm, peaceful state, we can listen to nice worship music. Or if we are doing some nice outreach kind of work, and if we want to engage with someone, we can listen to a different kind of upbeat Christian music because music is a connector of people. You may have vast backgrounds, totally different ends of the spectrum, but music can bring us all together and it can help us prepare for our spiritual assignment. It is critical that the one who is serving in a position that the one serving is in a position where they can adequately serve. You do not want to bleed out on people while you are leading. It is one thing to be a wounded healer, but it's another thing to be a bleeding leader. And you do not want to do that because if you are not healed, if you are not if you have not processed your own challenges and issues, whatever is in you is going to come out on those that you lead. And that is going to cause more harm than anything. So it is imperative that the one who is in a position serving is adequately prepared and ready to serve. And music can help center an individual as it helps to release chemicals such as neurochemicals, such as serotonin and dopamine. So it can really, really help us with that whole self-regulation process. It is a science behind all of what we go through because we are scientifically created. And then one of the most important things is let your worship do your work. We have seen in the text where worship has done the work for individuals in the word David's story, King Jehoshaphat, we see where worship really truly works. And when we worship, that's when we get the ear of God. God listens to us. We were created to worship. And that is a direct channel to God. And when we really truly get into that worshipful space, create that worshipful life for ourselves and create that safe worshipful space for others, that's when we'll see true transformation. I really appreciate you all taking the time to hang out with me this morning and into the afternoon. Hopefully, something has been said that has either re-jogged something in our mind, in our memory bank, or has given us a new tool to take into our ongoing ministry work. But I really have enjoyed my time with you all. Listening to your stories, listening to your own experiences has helped to shape me as a better individual and as a woman that's in ministry. You all are phenomenal people, and I thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much. But I do see that there was a hand before Dr. Camisha has to leave. Refuge from the Storm, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I didn't have a question, but I did want to share this. Prayerfully, it'll bless all of you. I have a now 2-year-old great grandbaby, and just before a year and a half, I started putting in her hand YouTube video that of the children singing "Yes, Jesus Loves Me," and every time I would go around, she would ask for that video. And when she could not sing, could not speak, actually could not talk, she learned to sing that song. And I just want to share that. It was just such a blessing to me.
Oh, so
God
sweet.
bless you. And I'm going to tell you the power of music. My niece, growing up, had apraxia, and it was a speech disorder, and she could not speak, but she could sing one of CeCe Winans' songs. And so my blessing was when I met CeCe Winans, when I got to introduce her, I told her about my niece, and she was unable to speak, but her songs she was able to sing. So music is very powerful. Music is very powerful.
We are so thankful. So on behalf of the Innovation Center, I want to share our thanks for leading us through this powerful webinar on trauma, resiliency, and healing. Thank you for teaching us and reminding us that we are not alone and providing such an incredible insight and understanding for ourselves and for others. Thank you so much. And I will be emailing this webinar recording next week to everyone. So please watch your inbox. And again, just sharing peace and blessings to all of you. And with that, I want to pass this over to Dr. Yvette, who's also going to be sharing the very next webinar coming up in July.
God bless everyone. And it's awesome to see Miss Wilson. We go back many years, a mentor, a guide, a woman of wisdom. And so just want to say thank you to the Innovation Center, Dr. Sue Kibbe and Maria, and then Mike, who is on, who's our technician, but giving thanks to God and for Dr. Camisha that we were in the same rooted cohort, that I was able to walk this journey and really understand trauma and the resilience and how music does have you overcome. So God bless you, Dr. Camisha. Thank you for giving of your time, talent, resource, energy, and most of all, your love for God's children to make sure that we are healed when we go through the waters and through the storms. We are so grateful to you, and God bless you. She has to leave as she's preparing for another event in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so I will see you in a few weeks at that event. So God bless you. Drive safe. And thank you so much, Dr. Camisha. We are grateful for you. God bless you. Now, I do want to share with everyone that this is the first of 4 of our webinars that we will have from the advocacy team for Black Methodists for Church Renewal. Our next one will be led by our own Bishop Cedric Bridgeford. He will get and start talking and sharing and guiding us through Get Plugged In. That will be on July 27th, same time, 9 a.m. Central Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
What was that date again?
That is July 27th.
Okay. And it's from 9 until the same
9
time,
to
9
noon.
to
Yes,
11.
9 to 11:30 to noon. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And more information will be coming out. Bishop Bridgeford was busy with General Conference, so wasn't able to get all of his information. Maria has been so patient. If you want to know what patient looks like, you look her up in the dictionary, because she asked me for this information. So I'm trying to get it, but I want to give you the date so you guys can share. And then on September the 14th, we will have Deaconess Claire Esther, who will talk to us about finding your joy in mission work. As you know, she went for a 6-month internship and ended up staying 35 years. God bless her. And last but not least, we will have Miss Erin Hawkins, who will provide a webinar on leadership excellence for laity, and that is going to be on December the 14th at the same time. So we are grateful. If there is a topic that you would like for the Laity Leadership Institute to look into, please let me know. My information is found on our BMCR website. I am on Facebook, Instagram, but also I work at St. James United Methodist Church in Kansas City. So you can find me if you would like to share any information. The team of a representative from each jurisdiction. So I would like to thank Theon Johnson, Dr. Reverend Theon Johnson from the Western jurisdiction. From South Central jurisdiction, the Reverend Cheryl Jefferson Bell. From the North Central, the Reverend Dewan Bowie. And from the Northeast jurisdiction, Deaconess Gail Douglas Boykin. And from the Southeast jurisdiction, Mrs. Pamela Schaffner. Those are the individuals that represent the advocacy team, and we review the information for our Laity Leadership Institute. Now in the South Central jurisdiction, Reverend Cheryl Jefferson Bell has rolled off, and Miss Janice Elmore has rolled on in the advocacy role. And so we are pleased that the Innovation Center, a part of United Theological Seminary, has partnered with us in such a phenomenal way, working together, bringing you these informative guidance and resources so that as laity, we can prepare to continue to take care of the least, the lost, the abandoned, and forgotten, because we are on assignment as laity and we need to be equipped. With that being said, I will turn it back over to Maria. God bless you, and everyone have a phenomenal day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Yvette, and thank you all. And again, I think that's all for today. We'll see you in July, hopefully, and you have a blessed day. Thank you.